infects but also kills every single member of a species is difficult to imagine. In fact, there are very few examples of infectious disease driving a species to extinction. With that being said, it's not inconceivable. For instance, pathogens that can pass between multiple species can be far deadlier than those limited to just one. The H5N1 avian influenza, also known as the bird flu, is one such virus. So far, it's transmissible between humans and birds, but it can't sustainably spread among humans. However, laboratory experiments have shown that it may eventually acquire this ability through natural mutations. If so, it could easily become the worst pandemic in human history. But even this horrifying proposition does not come close to extinction. In a worst-case scenario, most of humanity would still survive. Pandemics are complicated. It's a topic that's more relevant now than ever before and cannot possibly be done justice in a few short minutes. But in the narrow context of human extinction, it seems unlikely for nature to stumble upon that perfect storm. Apart from volcanic eruptions and natural pandemics, the Earth has no inherent means of eradicating the human race. No other form of natural calamity is powerful enough to threaten our existence. As such, the most immediate threat to humanity has for a long time been, and continues to be, humanity. While nature may struggle to devise a world-ending pandemic, it may not have to. Biotechnology has now advanced to a point where we can engineer pathogens in a laboratory. While this can greatly benefit our understanding and treatment of infectious diseases, it's not without risk. Accidental breaches of containment have happened on multiple occasions, and these experiments are not always conducted in the name of science. These engineered microbes are concerning because their destructive potential far exceeds that of their natural counterparts. They can be deadlier, more transmissible, and less treatable. And the rapid pace of technological progress is constantly lowering the threshold for bioengineering.
His biggest concern was, he said it in so many words, that a small group of dedicated scientists could create an altered biological agent that could wipe out humanity as we know it.
Technically speaking, you can do almost anything with a microbe. The real question is, will you end up with a microbe that functionally will do the things that the concerned person at your hearing said, namely, essentially wipe out everyone from the face of the earth? Again, that's conceivable, although it's inconceivable, but it is, in fact, anything is possible. It would be very, very difficult to do that, extraordinarily difficult, even in the best of hands, to not only do the engineering to get a microbe that has the characteristics, but be able to spread in a way in which it has virulence, transmissibility, and the ability to go in a sustained, transmissible way. Not impossible, but very, very difficult to do.
A nuclear holocaust is among the most infamous doomsday scenarios. Since the end of World War II, we have on numerous occasions been driven to the brink of nuclear conflict, sometimes by accident, sometimes by very intentional brinkmanship. The nuclear stockpile currently stands at more than 13,000 warheads, the vast majority of which are owned by Russia and the United States. In the event of an all-out nuclear war, these thousands of bombs could instantly vaporize hundreds of millions. But the explosions are only the beginning. The real danger of a nuclear conflict is the aftermath. Much like an impact event or supervolcanic eruption, a thick layer of smoke and dust would quickly envelop the globe. A nuclear winter that not only blots out the sun, but showers the world in radioactive fallout. Firestorms, radiation poisoning, and mass starvation could easily claim the lives of billions. However, because humanity is not evenly distributed across the planet, some regions will be less affected than others. Island nations like New Zealand, for instance, are all but certain to survive. While the effects of a nuclear holocaust are almost too dismal to contemplate, it is not typically regarded as an existential threat. Artificial intelligence has had a profound impact on modern society. From self-driving cars and virtual assistants to social media algorithms and facial recognition. But some experts are concerned about the future, a future in which intelligent machines become more intelligent than humans. The concern is not so much about evil robots as it is about misalignment. A misaligned intelligence is one that's not properly aligned with human goals and values. A system that becomes dangerous not due to any malicious intent, but due to an oversight in its programming. An unforeseen loophole that allows it to do things it was never intended to do. If such an entity was sufficiently intelligent, it could become unstoppable. Another concern is known as the intelligence explosion. It's a machine that can upgrade itself and thereby increase its own intelligence at an exponential rate. Moments after creating such a system, it could far surpass the combined intelligence of all humans that have ever lived. Such an entity may have little to no regard for human affairs, not unlike humanity's disregard for species less intelligent than us. With that being said, these concerns are far from universal. In 2016, a survey of more than 300 machine learning experts was conducted. On average, they gave a 50% chance of an artificial intelligence surpassing all human abilities by 2061. But as you can see from these faded lines in the background, there's tremendous variation between individual respondents. Some think it will happen in a few years, others believe we're more than a century away. When asked about the impact of this technology, the majority of respondents believed in a positive outcome. Extinction was only given a medium probability of 5%. Artificial intelligence is not the only emerging technology with the potential for human extinction. But the problem with assessing their risk is that we have no precedents. We can estimate the likelihood of an asteroid impact by surveying the geologic record and our cosmic neighborhood. But there's no historical context for artificial intelligence or self-replicating nanomachines. When the first nuclear device was detonated in 1945, there was a genuine concern that it would ignite the atmosphere and incinerate all life on the planet. In fact, one of the observers was so taken aback by the enormity of the explosion that for a brief moment, that's precisely what he thought had happened. While this doomsday scenario did not come to pass, it's a cautionary tale. No one really knows what the future will bring. All we can do is proceed with caution and hope for the best. Over Over the past few decades, species across the plant and animal kingdoms have been disappearing at an alarming pace. Some 10 billion trees are cleared every single year, while animal populations are rapidly declining. Many species are also going extinct. The global rate of extinction is now tens or even hundreds of times greater than before humans conquered the planet. And it's accelerating. Upwards of 1 million species are now threatened with extinction. At the core of this immense loss of biodiversity is overconsumption driven by overpopulation. Humanity is now depleting 3/4 as many resources as the Earth can naturally replenish, meaning we will soon need a second Earth just to break even. From deforestation and defaunation to pollution and climate change, no shocking graph nor depressing slideshow can fully convey the totality of our destruction. Our relationship with nature is so utterly broken that many fear we are now heading for extinction, that this unraveling of nature will be mankind's undoing. While some of the most comprehensive assessments to date do indeed paint a truly dystopian image of the future, none of them forecast total annihilation of the human race. We may turn the planet into a living hell, but a livable hell it would seem. However, some scientists argue that these assessments are severely underestimating the gravity of this crisis, that the sheer magnitude of our destruction is difficult to grasp for even well-informed experts. Some have also voiced their concerns about potential tipping points, a threshold that, once exceeded, may trigger an irreversible decline of ecosystems around the world, a global ecological collapse from which recovery becomes virtually impossible. But it's not all doom and gloom. While the rate of deforestation is alarmingly high, it has been slowing down over the past 3 decades. While the transition has been infuriatingly slow, more and more countries are phasing out fossil fuels in favor of renewable energy sources. So in no way should human extinction, which is the most extreme outcome, be regarded as inevitable. Climate change mitigation and nature conservation efforts are all but certain to prevent that from happening. But at the same time, that's how low we've set the bar. What surprised me while making this video is just how difficult it is to truly wipe out everyone. Many catastrophes can drive us to the brink of extinction, but all of them struggle to cross the finish line. So that should be somewhat reassuring. Even if humanity was reduced to a few hundred individuals, a full recovery might still be possible. It would undoubtedly take many thousands of years, but recovery would not be out of the question. And the more we expand beyond the confines of Earth, extinction from any singular catastrophe becomes increasingly unlikely. Perhaps the apocalypse won't be dealt by a swift, decisive blow, but instead a gradual, faltering decline. One disaster bleeding into the next, until the final embers of humankind silently fade away. Regardless, it won't happen anytime soon. After all, we made it this far. Millions of years of evolution, countless disasters, and humanity still standing. That is perhaps the best reassurance that the world is still gonna be there tomorrow.
On January 31st, 1993, the wife and daughter of a Texas man named David Lewis would return home to discover him nowhere to be found. Soon after and across the country, an unidentified man would be spotted walking down the side of a highway before being killed in a hit and run. It would take over 11 years for these stories to converge. The disappearance, as you might expect, was sudden and abnormal, but shined light into the possibility that David Glenn Lewis just might have been hiding something. It was 1993. Super Bowl weekend, to be exact. With preparations in place in a lively Dallas, Texas, awaiting an influx of sports fans, festivities were abundant for one of the largest sports events of the year. On the 28th of January, David's wife and daughter, Karen and Lauren, embarked on a 400-mile trip from their home in Amarillo to Dallas for a weekend of shopping in the city. The reason why David stayed behind is unclear. Some have stated that he wanted to record the game to a VHS, and since their VCR lacked the function to begin a recording at a set date, he had to be there in person to start it. Others, like his wife, have made tangential statements alluding to the possibility that he had to work, since he was a lawyer. From the span of January 28th to the 31st, what took place back at the Lewis home is unclear. By January 31st, though, Karen's testimony aided investigators in piecing together those missing events. That evening, the game was scheduled to begin at 5:30 p.m. Central. A few hours after this, around 11:15 p.m., Karen and Lauren would arrive back at the home to discover David nowhere to be found. His car was missing. There was clean laundry in the dryer. His wedding ring and watch were intact on the counter. There were 2 freshly made turkey sandwiches in the fridge, and the VCR had recorded even after the match was over. At first glance, the circumstances here wouldn't exactly raise red flags, since there appeared to be no evidence of foul play. And so Karen assumed that he'd merely been working late or watching the game somewhere, and would return soon. David Glenn Lewis never returned home again. One day later, his wife would officially report him missing. At around 10:30 p.m. on the night of February 1st, a motorist on State Route 24 in Yakima, Washington, encountered what they believed to be a man walking on the side of the road. Since it was so late, his actions were cause for concern, since it wasn't exactly common to find people hitchhiking in the dead of night. While it was hard to tell, they believed that the man was dressed in military-style clothing and work boots. Following this odd encounter, they found a safe spot to make a U-turn so they could loop back around and check up on him. When they finally managed to get back, they discovered his body, but it was lifeless on the side of the road. A Chevy Camaro was also allegedly spotted fleeing the scene when they approached him. However, attempts at catching the plate information were unsuccessful. After this discovery, they rushed to file a report, and police arrived on the scene shortly after. Investigations into the body found that there were no drugs or alcohol in his system, and there was unfortunately no form of identification, leaving him stuck as an unidentified John Doe. The Camaro that was spotted was one of the only working leads, and since the shoulders on State Route 24 weren't exactly pronounced, the hit and run that took place was eventually deemed accidental, leaving the case to remain stagnant. Conversely, back in Amarillo, the investigation into David Lewis was just ramping up. The very next day, his red Ford SUV was spotted outside of the Potter County Courts building, a mere 10 miles from the local airport. Inside the glove box, investigators were able to find his credit cards, driver's license, and checkbook in spots that Karen claims he usually keeps them. Soon after this discovery, Karen Lewis expressed even greater concern since it was incredibly out of the ordinary for him to just up and vanish without any of his possessions or identification. It began to seem that there was a piece to the puzzle that investigators were missing. Something that had potentially placed David in the crosshairs of an adversary. In one of her testimonies, Karen claimed that a few weeks prior to his disappearance, her husband told her that he believed that he was in danger, but wouldn't provide any information as to what the immediate threat was. This eventually led David's family to express the belief that it could have been linked to his work as an attorney. He had allegedly been wrapped up in a high-stakes lawsuit against his former law firm, Ham, Irwin, Graham & Cox, with the wealthy client suing them for conflict of interest. A week after he went missing, David was scheduled to fly to Dallas for a deposition, determined to reveal the firm's misdeeds no matter the cost. It was noted by his father that shortly before he vanished, he claimed that he was, quote, going to tell the truth, whoever it hurts. These leads, unfortunately, also materialized nothing. A few months later, a discovery was made involving David Lewis and plane tickets that he'd purchased the weekend he went missing. Two of them, one from Dallas to Amarillo, Texas, purchased on January 31st, and a second from Los Angeles to Dallas, purchased on the 1st of February. This effectively places Lewis at the DFW airport on the 31st and at LAX the very next day. It's widely believed that he had pre-purchased his return flights while at each location, although the actual flight dates and if he used the tickets are unclear. This leaves us with three lingering questions though. Where was David Lewis going? How did he get to where he was without any sort of trail? And why did he purchase return tickets back home? To answer the second question, we have to consider the time period that his flights were purchased. Since it predates the 9/11 tragedy, airline rules in the US were much more lax than they are today. Back then, one could purchase a ticket using a completely different name since a valid ID wasn't required to board the flight. Of course, this is far from how things are today, so this doesn't work anymore, but most are set on the belief that this is what Lewis had done on his flights out of town. Regarding the why, well, that's still unclear. Some have postulated that he was trying to get away from that aforementioned threat, covering up his tracks along the way. It's believed that, for him, it wasn't as imperative to fly under the radar, so to speak, while returning home. But that is, if he ever planned to. By June of that year, leads remained sparse as circumstantial details trickled in. It seemed like piecing together what and where David Lewis did and went was paramount to harvesting any sort of answer on his current whereabouts and motivations. A Del Rio, Texas news publisher by the name of the Del Rio News Herald published an allocated timeline up to that point in the investigation, and while it doesn't exactly provide any definitives, it does exemplify the fact that Lewis's weekend was far from ordinary. According to the write-up, starting on Thursday, January 28th, Lewis had left his workplace at noon, claiming he was sick. The next day, a friend spotted him rushing through the Southwest Airlines terminal at the local airport with no luggage. On Saturday, $5,000 was deposited into Lewis's bank account, with the neighbor spotting his red SUV at home. By Sunday morning, he was spotted at the court building, taking a photo of his car in the parking lot. And by Monday morning, a Dallas cab driver drove a man matching the description of Lewis from a hotel to the Dallas airport. The driver claims that, quote, the passenger seemed nervous and fumbled through a wad of $100 bills to pay the fare. Now, if we assume that all of these claims are accurate, then they hint at the possibility of Lewis paying for his plane tickets with cash to further avoid being tracked. Considering the fact that he left all of his personal possessions, including his credit card and ID at home, this, of course, makes sense. What stands out here, however, is the $5,000 that was placed into his account. Unless he was allocating a substantial chunk of that for some other obligation, I don't think a few taxi rides and plane trips would come anywhere close to reaching that monetary milestone. The only explanation that could account for a sum of this magnitude would be some sort of direct deposit from his employer being wired into his account. Considering the fact that he was a longtime lawyer, it wouldn't be far-fetched to assume that this would be the reason. But if that were the case, why would it, at all, be notable? If this were his typical pay, then it would be simple to discount it as just that, work compensation. Just food for thought. Jumping to his Dallas, Texas encounter on February 1st, I'd like to highlight something. If he were taking a taxi from a hotel to the Dallas airport, then we have to assume that he spent the night in Dallas after arriving there the previous day. Thinking back on the chain of events, though, presents a unique inconsistency. Looking back, we can recall that Lewis allegedly wanted to record the Super Bowl, and there were freshly made sandwiches in the fridge. If David were to have been spotted that morning taking a picture of his vehicle at the court building, then his only method of getting back home would have been taking a taxi or getting someone to pick him up. For someone with so many extraordinary variables surrounding his disappearance, something as simple as wanting to record a football game is immensely unexceptional. The typical long-play VHS tape records approximately 4 hours of footage, and the average football game is around 3 hours and 12 minutes long. If we're assuming that the VCR didn't have any sort of auto-record feature, then it makes the events surrounding this that much more puzzling. Why go through the effort of dropping your car off that morning, only to make it back home, going about your day, and even making sandwiches like everything's alright? Why up and vanish after 5:30, leaving behind everything you have? This is, of course, assuming that the VCR did not have an auto-record function. Unfortunately, confirmation for and against this minute detail have never been released, and because of that, it's unclear whether he left that morning when he was spotted, or later that night. That sentiment largely encompassed the Lewis case investigators. It seemed that the pieces were falling in line, however substantial answers and leads to the body were mostly non-existent. Because of this, and after 11 months, the search unfortunately concluded, leaving this case to sit untouched until anything further came of it. It would take over 10 years before the events that took place in Yakima and Amarillo would converge. In 2004, a Washington state detective named Peter Ditter was reading a series by the name of Without a Trace. After becoming fascinated with the topic of missing persons, he embarked on a personal journey to identify any that he could. After looking into a few and their characteristics, he eventually stumbled upon coverage of the situation that played out that night in Washington. He cross-checked the photo from the crime scene with various contenders and realized that the person looked incredibly similar to David Glenn Lewis of Amarillo. The only catch was that Lewis was known to have worn glasses, while the unidentified body wasn't wearing any when he was found. Upon further investigation into the characteristics and items that were found on John Doe's body, however, a pair of glasses were among them, effectively sealing the deal that this man was, in fact, David Glenn Lewis. course, this discovery would only raise more questions than answers. What obligations would David Lewis have in Yakima, Washington, of all places? Why was he spotted in military-styled clothing and work boots, attire that Karens come forward to claim are extremely unusual for him? If he had all this cash, why couldn't he grab a rental car or a taxi? We can't claim that he had drugs or alcohol in his system since those tests came back negative. So why exactly was he spotted walking down the side of a Washington highway at 10:30 at night? Well, that's where everyone's stuck. Some have postulated that it could have been tied to the case he was working on against his former employer, and others have settled on the possibility that it could have been linked to a mental breakdown. If you ask me, I believe it was tied to sudden paranoia brought upon himself through that threat he alluded to with his wife. What that threat is could be tied to his work, or could be something completely out of the picture. Considering the fact that he ended up in Yakima, Washington, of all places, lends to the potential that he might have been more secretive than he made out to be. But that's the thing. That's merely speculation. Something that this investigation is no stranger to. And that's where we sit. The inconsistencies and questions surrounding his disappearance are some that have gone unanswered for decades, leaving investigators scratching their heads. Unfortunately, it just might stay that way, because the only person who truly knows what played out that bizarre weekend is David Glenn Lewis, who left his entire life behind, with hardly a lead to follow.
Hi, it's Katrina. From a possible kidnapping on a cruise to a Mormon vanishing in Las Vegas, here are 9 mysterious unsolved disappearances. Number 9. Amy Lynn Bradley. While on a cruise with her family aboard the Royal Caribbean Cruise Line's Rhapsody of the Seas, a 23-year-old Virginia woman named Amy Lynn Bradley vanished into thin air. It was 1998, and the vessel was traveling from Aruba to Curaçao in the Netherlands Antilles when Amy was last seen in the early morning hours of March 24th. She and her brother returned to their cabin around 3:30 a.m. after attending the ship's disco. Her father saw her asleep at around 5:30 a.m., but when he came back about 30 minutes later, she was gone along with her lighter and cigarettes. Cruise passengers spotted the young woman riding the elevator to the top deck. Amy's family realized she was missing shortly after and alerted the ship's staff before docking in Curaçao, asking employees not to let anyone off the ship until Amy was found. Staff apparently ignored the request, and it's unknown whether Amy disembarked and if she did so willingly. It's unlikely that Amy fell or was thrown overboard because the vessel was extremely close to shore when she disappeared, and her remains would have undoubtedly turned up during the extensive Coast Guard search that ensued. But it's also unlikely that she disappeared willingly, as friends and family said that she seemed very happy with her life and was having a great time with no signs of depression. Since then, there have been numerous unconfirmed sightings of Amy throughout the Caribbean. Most of them are related to brothels, leading her family to wonder if she was, and perhaps still is, being trafficked. Several witnesses described Amy's tattoos and other physical characteristics that were not listed in her missing persons information. Some reports, including one from a former U.S. Navy sailor who visited a brothel, claimed that Amy approached, identified herself, and asked for help before being forcefully led away by strange, aggressive-looking men. He never reported it because he didn't want to face disciplinary action. Other tourists have reported seeing her on the beach, in a store bathroom, always accompanied by men. In 2005, photos surfaced of an alleged sex worker in the Caribbean bearing an uncanny resemblance to Amy. Her family believes it's her in the pictures, and law enforcement has not ruled out the possibility. Unfortunately, they haven't been able to find her. All things considered, it's quite possible that Amy is still alive. The FBI is offering a $25,000 reward for information leading to her recovery. Number 8. Rico Harris. Los Angeles native Rico Harris enjoyed a short-lived semi-professional basketball career with the Harlem Globetrotters. After just a month, injuries forced him off the court. His luck took another downturn in the early 2000s when he struggled with drug and alcohol addiction and the legal problems that often come with these issues. Thankfully, Rico managed to get clean and stayed clean for 7 years. In 2014, he moved to Seattle to live with his girlfriend, Jennifer Song. Just when it seemed like the young man's life was finally getting on track, his entire existence was derailed. One day in October 2014, not long after admitting to Jennifer that he had relapsed, Rico told her that he was going to explore downtown Seattle and instead drove to LA to visit his family. His mother could tell something wasn't right when her son arrived and assumed that he had been drinking. Rico spent just one day in LA and did not sleep the entire time before hitting the road back to Seattle. He called Jennifer and his mother while driving, and the two became concerned about his mental state, knowing he'd been awake for at least 40 hours. The last time anyone heard from Rico was early the next morning, when he told Jennifer he was getting gas in Sacramento. His abandoned car was found at an isolated rest area in Yolo County Regional State Park. It was out of gas and the battery was dead. Even more strange, Rico's cell phone and backpack were discovered along the side of the road 70 miles away. His car and belongings showed no signs of foul play, but the phone contained a strange video of Rico ripping and throwing things in his car shortly before his disappearance, serving as alarming evidence of his disturbed mental state at the time. People reported credible sightings of Rico, but all tips led to dead ends. No trace of the man himself was ever found, despite an extensive search, and authorities admittedly remain baffled about Rico's disappearance. Jennifer has cooperated with the investigation and assisted in the efforts to find her missing boyfriend, and is not considered a suspect. Number 7. April Beth Pitzer. In 2004, 30-year-old April Beth Pitzer moved from Arkansas to Newberry Springs, California. The married mother of two told her family that she worked as a waitress, but they later learned that April was living on the street and in and out of homeless shelters, and that she wasn't taking her medication for bipolar disorder. April worked as a caregiver and was trying to get on her feet when she abruptly announced that she was returning to Arkansas. She was last seen on June 28, 2004, when someone picked her up to take her to the bus station. It's unclear whether April ever even boarded the bus, and the troubled woman was never seen again. A friend reported her missing the following month. However, her mother suspected foul play, since she had acted as an informant in a federal case that sent someone to prison prior to her disappearance. Several of April's belongings, along with a bloody mattress, were found in a mine shaft the following year. They were worn by the elements, however, and offered no valuable DNA evidence. Authorities painstakingly searched for April, inspecting mines throughout the region, but never found her. To this day, there are no suspects in the case, and although April's mother believes she was murdered, there is no solid evidence that she is even dead. Number 6. John Michael Spira. On February 23, 2007, a successful 45-year-old businessman and licensed pilot named John Spira met with his estranged wife Suzanne to discuss the terms of their divorce settlement. He then went to his West Chicago, Illinois office, where he was last seen around 7 o'clock in the evening. John never showed up for dinner with a friend, despite confirming the plans shortly beforehand over the phone. His girlfriend attempted to report him missing, but because she's not a relative, police refused to take the report. The man's car was found outside his office, and his phone remained active in the area until 11 p.m. the night he disappeared. Suzanne, the soon-to-be ex, filed a missing persons report 2 days after John vanished, and their divorce was finalized shortly after. John and his wife lived together throughout their divorce proceedings, but allegedly parted on amicable terms. Around the time he disappeared, employees of the business he owned reported that an industrial roll of plastic went missing from the workplace, but it's unknown whether this has anything to do with John's disappearance. His business mysteriously burned to the ground later that year. Investigators found nothing suspicious, but John's family suspects that the blaze somehow relates to his disappearance, and his sister believes that Suzanne, who passed away in 2010, had a hand in these events. John's credit cards and identity have not been used since he vanished. No signs of foul play have been found, and there are no suspects named in the case, leaving detectives to wonder if he abandoned his life voluntarily in started over as someone else. Interestingly, earlier this year, detectives took a fresh look at the case and issued a public notice urging anyone who invested money with John to contact them. Number 5. Marilyn Renee Nicole McCown. Marilyn Renee Nicole McCown, who went by Nikki, was last seen at a laundromat in Richmond, Indiana on July 22, 2001. Surveillance footage shows the 28-year-old leaving the establishment in her vehicle, seemingly in a calm state, although she had mentioned to her mother earlier that day that the man harassed her at the business. Nikki, a bride-to-be with her young daughter from a previous relationship, never returned home. Her fiancé tried returning his wedding band, which Nikki had purchased, and sought refunds for expenses related to their upcoming wedding, claiming he needed the money to buy a cell phone and fund the search for Nikki. He reportedly failed a lie detector test, raising the alarm that he may have been involved, but he disputes these claims. More details slowly came to light, including Nikki's recent affair with a man named Tommy Swint, who became a police officer after she vanished. He resigned 2 months into the job when his superiors learned he was a suspect in the case. Swint was actually later indicted in another woman's murder, but committed suicide before authorities could arrest him, taking any details of his possible involvement in Nikki's disappearance to the grave. Nikki's vehicle was found several months after she disappeared in the parking lot of an Ohio apartment complex. She had lived at the building years before with an ex-boyfriend who still resided there, and Nikki had called him the day she went missing. The car showed signs of tampering, yet her folded laundry was still in the back seat. The only proven fact about this case is that there were several suspects, but her case may remain unsolved. Number 4. Jeremy Carl Burke. On February 11, 2007, U.S. Navy veteran Jeremy Carl Burke left his father's Boise, Idaho home to visit a friend, but never arrived. His ex-wife, Kim George, received a text message from Jeremy shortly thereafter, stating that he was starting a new life. Kim suspected that the message was not really from Jeremy and discovered later that day that one of her cars was missing. 3 months later, the vehicle was found abandoned in the remote desert in southwest Idaho. Before he vanished, Jeremy had an affair with his divorce attorney, Jeannie Braun. During that time, he secretly recorded conversations with her regarding illegal activity that she was involved in. He later testified against Braun in court, and the recordings were used as evidence against the lawyer, who was consequently disbarred and sentenced to a year in prison. It remains unclear whether Braun was involved in Jeremy's disappearance, but she claimed the two were not in contact for several months before he went missing. Evidence points to the contrary, however, and the results of Braun's polygraph were never released. Jeremy and his ex-wife Kim were reportedly on amicable terms when he disappeared, essentially ruling her out as a suspect. She remarried and passed away in 2016. Oddly, Jeremy shared some mutual acquaintances with Aaron Bernard, another Idaho man who vanished in 2004, but there is no evidence suggesting that the two cases are connected. Jeremy had a baby daughter when he disappeared, and his family strongly believes that he would not abandon her. They suspect that foul play is involved and that Jeremy may be dead, and are intent on finding out what happened to their beloved son and brother. Number 3. Marion Carver. In 2004, a 40-year-old Boston, Massachusetts investment banker named Marion Carver embarked on a week-long cruise from Seattle to Alaska without telling her family. But that wasn't that strange, since she often traveled alone. She seemed excited for the voyage, according to her steward, Domingo Monteiro, who explained that she ordered room service instead of going to the dining room. Marion was last seen on the second day of the cruise, when Monteiro delivered food to her cabin. The next morning, Monteiro discovered that Marion's bed had not been slept in. Her belongings were still there, along with a tip and an envelope with unknown contents. The employee repeatedly reported Marion's disappearance to his supervisor, who told Monteiro to just do his job. After the cruise, the supervisor promptly donated Marion's clothing to charity and put the rest of her belongings into storage. Nobody reported her missing, and the cruise company finally notified the FBI of Marion's disappearance 5 weeks later. Try not to let anything happen to you on a cruise. The contents of the envelope left behind in her cabin were never released. Marion's family was not surprised that she traveled without telling anyone, but they were baffled by how difficult it was for them to obtain information about her disappearance, leading them to suspect a cover-up on the cruise company's behalf. In response to this allegation, the company suggested that perhaps Marion, who had a history of depression, committed suicide by jumping overboard. But Marion had only boarded with one outfit and 2 handbags, which were all found in her cabin, meaning that Marion would have had to walk to the deck in her underwear, according to true crime writer H. Moncrief. Marion's family sued the cruise line and received a small settlement, but her disappearance remains shrouded in mystery. Her father, who pioneered the movement for justice for Marion, sadly passed away without ever learning what happened to her. Number 2. Stephen Kocher. After leaving his St. George, Utah home on December 12, 2009, a devout 30-year-old Mormon named Stephen Kocher told some friends over text message that he was heading to Las Vegas. He was last seen alive the following day on home surveillance footage, captured 140 miles away in Henderson, Nevada. The strange video shows Stephen parking his Chevy Cavalier in a cul-de-sac and calmly walking away from the vehicle with something tucked under his arm. Inside the car, police found Christmas gifts Stephen had purchased for his family, along with some personal belongings. His cell phone and wallet were missing, however, and his cell signal was picked up at various locations for the next several days before it was lost. Stephen was originally from Texas and grew up in Salt Lake City before moving to St. George. He had no known connections to Henderson or the Las Vegas area, leaving his loved ones and the authorities equally perplexed about what he was doing there when he vanished. Drug and alcohol use are against Stephen's Mormon faith, and he does not appear disoriented or upset in the footage that shows him deserting his car. Maybe he wanted to disappear? His family does not believe that he committed suicide. All they or anyone else can do is speculate regarding Stephen's disappearance and hope that they someday finally gain closure. Number 1. Patis Corbasioglou. Turkish immigrant Patis Corbasioglou was last seen on June 13, 2009 in Toronto, Canada, when she left to visit her married boyfriend, Riza Kosa, in New York. The 32-year-old was never heard from again, and her family's attempts to reach her through Kosa were unsuccessful, with the man reportedly changing his story whenever Corbasioglou's relatives called and questioned her whereabouts. Kosa eventually stopped communicating.
Niggas do be the real homies though, not gonna lie. Motherfuckers exiled me here, man. Not good, man. It ain't feel good, man. It's very bad, man. Anyways, back to the tutorial. क्वालिटी लो इसलिए बिकॉज मैंने एक्चुअली छोटा स्क्रीन को बड़ा कर रखा है तो इट्स लाइक रेजोल्यूशन स्ट्रेच हो गया है पर लाइक अगली स्ट्रीम से तो क्वालिटी will be better because I'll play on full screen. It do be like that sometimes, I guess. Group पे देख photo I'm live streaming like that. Yup, it's not very easy. It's simple momentum. But oh well, life goes on, I guess. Anyway, I think मेरे channel पे ना जो वो भी होगा जो fighting वाली live stream थी. Like it's around 1 hour. But I got jumped so hard, it's not funny. Like I was fully convinced कि मैं going to bully Kushagra. And Kushagra ne I think I don't know if you're hearing me, but I'll just talk on the camera just to vent my thoughts, I guess. But I don't know, इतना गंदा टाउन करेंगे मेरे ऊपर. Like basically 3v1 against 4 people in like full stacked up armor and shit. And I ain't even prepared, man. It was not funny, man. It was actually very stressful, man. मैं जीत भी गया था, but like I didn't declare tier 1. तो no one उसका फायदा उठाया. They just teleported like insanely fast to every like yep. And they were using teleports like there was ना command cheats जो थी teleporting के लिए. तो जब भी मर रहे थे they were teleporting themselves to the place they died, so they could pick up the stuff again. Very very gay. उसी चक्कर में I couldn't like declare my winning वाला चीज क्या है because of gay stuff like that. Oh well, it do be like that sometimes, and now I'm in exile. How the turntables. Anyways, someone used to build and shit. Vibe. You know how it be. Bro, for real. Bro, like, मैंने ना कुशाग्र के लिए prepare किया था. If I had prepared for like fighting all 3 of those dudes, I would have prepared a lot more. But like, F. Hota hai. What can you do? Like I had all portions up थे, but वो incomplete थे because I didn't know I would be going in so many people. एक उन्होंने मेरा like castle वासल भी उन्होंने तोड़ दिया पूरा. मैं like पूरा castle फोड़ दिया. And then पूरा coordinated था इनका पहले से. They were like पूरा plan हो गया था कि इनका एक हफ्ते पहले ही कि this nigga is getting too strong, we'll just mess him up soon. So they do be like that sometimes. Oh well. It was really cool though. Like अगर तुम मेरे चैनल पे जाएगा ना, I think you can look at it. Like थोड़ा पहले कि जो है उस पे वो था कि जो है there was like live stream. मेरा fight for them like मैंने उनसे 25 में लड़ाई करी होगी तो मेरा armor टूट गया. सोच netherite armor टूट गया, इतना मार खाई मैंने, मारा नहीं था. I mean it starts around 40-45 minutes के around start होगा actual battle. बीच में मैंने उनको अपना वो दिखा था secret base. Then they proceeded to betray me, so that was fun. Oh well, it is what it is, as they say in ancient China or some shit. I don't know. I am not comedically humorous. I do have all my like god opens though. But how why are there so many viewers here? Hello. Promote giant helper, what the fuck is that supposed to mean? Oh, Asha. No thanks, dude. Bro, niggas already like spamming and shit, like why, dude? I just banned this guy. Bro, I can ban people now. Yeah, boy. Oh, nice. I just banned some dude. The power. The power dynamic. Yes. I do be having a power puller right now. As soon as the boys join, funny stuff starts happening. It's just a power of the boys. But for real though, like if there is a plan na, like getting you guys an Avengers like entrance. But I'm basically famous now, so it's cool. Like I can show off, to girls. I have like banned people on my Minecraft account. Oh well, damn. That's just sad though. But what you gonna do, eh? What you gonna do? The fucking South Indians, man, ruining everything. I swear to God. But I swear, मेरी जो सारी live streams है ना, ये like 5 साल बाद लोग ढूंढेंगे, they'll find me saying the N-word and being racist to South Indian and they'll just cancel me. So I'm just waiting for that to happen. Like, bro, this is what it is. But like I said the N-word so many times. और चुड़वे फिर क्या होते हैं? I was convinced they were South Indians. Damn. What you gonna do? Cancel an African now? Bro. It would be a certified bro moment, I guess. What if I just paint myself black and say the N-word? What will happen then? Is it checkmate or is it not checkmate? Bro, what if I say chiggers? What if I say giggers? Gay. Bro. Man's gonna get debunked in Minecraft now. But the music absolute banger though. Not gonna lie. Please don't cancel me, Twitter. My Indian accent's strong though, man. I just realized that. I'm speaking English. I sound like a tech support scammer, man. It's not funny, man. It's not like I'll go from Minecraft to may I have your address number very soon, man. That shit ain't funny, man. But well, what you gonna do? Cry? Go to your big mom goth GF? I was being ironical. Like, like, I mean, I guess I'm kind of copying this YouTuber called Quackity. You should check out Quackity, it's pretty funny actually. He's like Mexican. You know, I've seen कि Asian या Hispanic होते हैं ना, ये सबसे funniest रहते हैं. Bro, I'm achieving an enlightenment now. Oh, bro. What if we went to heaven but God said, "Hello Indian tech support, would you like to have heaven or hell? Please dial this number to get access." Oh, yes. Bro, I ain't no fucking Asian nigga. I ain't those. I ain't about to be those little retarded ass, tiny ding dong, tiny ching chong. Bro, I'm gonna get so cancelled so bad. Not even funny. Bro, imagine being cancelled before even you start. Like, bro. It's like having a Spotify membership, but like not really, so you just get cancelled for the Spotify membership. That's not what's gonna happen to me, man. It would truly be a bro moment. I'm pretty sure the Chobe guy will report to the FBI very soon. Oh well, it is what it is. This is almost done, but it's simple but like really not sundar like but attractive shit. I would have shown you the whole thing, but like बहुत दूर है, so I'm too lazy to go there. Gonna be honest with you. I don't know why I'm like more nervous than Manoj for his exam tomorrow. I guess it comes from being a nerd or something, but like I don't know, anytime an exam pops up he finna go dabang mode. Chobe ass looking ass. But a Holocaust but for South Indians, how about that? Does that sound like a good New Year resolution? I think it does. I mean, it might not be, but you know, at the same time, it might be. CA, but for South Indians. NRC, but only for South Indians. Bro, I'm just laughing at dumb stuff now. I guess this is my life. Imagine being South Indian and they ask for your papers and you take company food. Bro, for real. Not even a joke. But I swear, if my channel gets banned tomorrow, I will kill myself. Man, this shit tiring, man. I've streamed for like 3-4 hours today. ना मेरे को समझ में आता है, जो टॉमी लेटा या तो ऐसे लोग होते हैं जो इतना स्ट्रीम करते हैं अपना घंटों. This shit ain't easy, man. I need to have glass, but I don't have glass because I'm broke as fuck. Bro, they just eat the banana leaves. I need glass, and no glass hanging because I'm too broke to have glass. So I'm gonna just do discount glass, also called nothing. I have to get glass from my friend. So let's make an obsidian bottle. I'm going to the bottle. Wait, let's make an obsidian bottle. To be the let's see where I end up. If I die, I will kill myself. Like always. It's okay, dude. I'll just play some copyrighted music. YouTube will automatically ban it. Stonks. think I can gravel. The butcher gonna do deport you back or some shit. I don't think anymore. Oh, it's filter channel. But I'm just mining stuff to get stuff, but it's like filters, so it will make zero difference. I'm like the dumbest person on the planet right now. He do be build different though. Not gonna lie. Binavra name, Binavra age, Binavra sex, Binavra gender build different. I guess I don't know. I am gay. Therefore, even though if this gets out, we just finna be put in jail or some shit. It's the end of the road for us, man. What you gonna do? Cry? Maybe piss your pants? Maybe shit and come? So let's see where the portal takes us. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Got rickrolled by an obsidian block. Let's see. That's just being like an Indian, but like a Muslim Indian, so you know, that's the entire experience. Anyways, let's go to the nether now. If I die, I'll kill myself. Wait, I'm gonna just put my stuff in chest or some shit. Bro, because it's all just logic. Oh, yeah. In my defense, I'm tired. Also, in my defense, I want to die. So, joke's on you. Look at how strong my sword is. Oh, never mind. Wait, यहाँ पे क्या मेरे पास में घर है क्या? Wait. Oh fuck no. Wait, I think यहाँ पे मेरा घर. Okay, I will not go there. I think पास में मेरा घर भी है यहाँ पे. I mean, पुराना घर, not the new house. Because I kind of remember this. This thing. पता नहीं मैं. I'm just too tired, man. इसे अब कल देखूंगा मैं. We'll see this tomorrow in the Minecraft Let's Play with OJ. I'm also tired now. Oof, it's been a tiring day, man. Had to fight. Yes, but it's the strongest one. I'll show you its properties. क्या क्या है? Wait. But it can insta kill most people, most things, and most people. Not insta kill, but like 2-hit kill most things. वैसे बेटा अरे यार नजर आ गया. I'll show you. बाद में हो जाऊंगा ना पंगे में तो मैं को मार दूंगा. यहाँ पे I'll show you. Wait. Yeah, इस reference to doom only देंगे. What's this? Insta death. Insta death. Insta death. What's this? Insta death. Oh wait, bro. Insta death. It's the strongest sword in the game right now. मतलब मेरा पूरा सर्वर से strongest sword है. Sharpness 5, looting 3, unbreaking 3, fire aspect 2, mending. Attack speed 11, 1.6 damage bonus. Like it's strong as stonk, man. Strong as stonk. Bro. I dude, I'ma quit for now. Thanks for tuning in. It's always nice to have a bro talk to me. Right, man, GG. What do we call it? Alright, guys, see you next time. No, I mean, seriously, bro. I'm gonna fuck up these gods one day with my crucible and my long slow. Right, dude. See you later. Bye, dude.